Kelly could feel the vibration of the fluorescent lights buzzing in her teeth. They made the room look unnaturally spotless, like a photograph edited until it barely resembled the truth. She sat with her legs drawn beneath her on the narrow vinyl chair and watched Mark sleep in a bed that now occupied the entire center of her little, suspended world. Tubes curled into the bend of his arm like pale, translucent vines. Machines kept time with a strange mechanical heartbeat. Beep, whisper, sigh. Outside, New York City moved on with its ordinary rhythm, cabs honking, late trains grinding. But inside this room, time had collapsed into nothing more than Mark's chest rising and falling. It had begun, they told her, as a straightforward procedure. A stubborn patch of skin, a mole that became suspicious under closer scrutiny. Something he'd postponed because their schedules never stopped. Scripts, shoots, guest appearances, weekends in Montauk. Mark had brushed it off in the days leading up to the surgery, half joking, half posturing, as if humor could deflect anything real. Kelly remembered the way he squeezed her hand in pre-op, that ridiculous little smirk stationed at the edge of his mouth, his easy confidence that always invited mischief. "Don't hold the funeral yet, Ripa," he teased. "Promise," she'd shot back, matching his lightness. It was the last moment he felt fully like himself. The news anchor in her mind, the one that narrated everything public about her life, was merciless. Cameras in the courtyard, fans gathered on the sidewalk, the kind of attention their faces always summoned. She had expected to be shielded by PR teams, gentle statements, polite reassurances crafted to manage discomfort. What she had not expected was the scorching sting of betrayal when the word error first slipped from the mouth of a doctor with a board certification and a catalog of soft apologies spoken like transactions. "A preventable complication," Dr. Hale said that afternoon, his voice tempered, rehearsed into institutional calm. "A lapse in monitoring during the post-operative period. It's been reported. We're investigating." The words didn't land softly. They ricocheted through her, shattering into 1,000 sharp possibilities of what might have been. When she finally found her voice, it came out small, swallowed by the wide, echoing corridor. "What do you mean, lapse?" When she looked at the staff, the team of doctors who had cared for Mark over the years, the people who had been trusted through birthdays and minor injuries, she didn't just see a mistake. She saw a culture that had let complacency settle in like dust. A nurse late on vitals. A monitor turned down to avoid a false alarm because too many false alarms had become irritating. A junior resident juggling 2 patients and choosing the easier one. Human errors, yes, but together they were catastrophic. Mark's heart had made a wild, dangerous leap toward crisis. Then, thanks to an attentive nurse passing by and a frantic resuscitation, it was pulled back. He survived. He would recover. But the scar, both on his body and in the family's private ledger, had already been etched. Kelly sat in the lingering clinical aftertaste, rubbing alcohol, lemon-scented sanitizer, antiseptic. The hospital's apology arrived in a statement trimmed down to the minimum, earnest enough to serve, guarded enough to shield. The board promised a review. The legal team promised sensitivity. The press unleashed questions and speculation that sliced through tabloids and talk shows. Scary medical error blared across the headlines. She was accustomed to living under relentless public attention. She was not accustomed to struggling whether that same scrutiny was now misdirecting her. The first time the idea of switching hospitals appeared, it came quietly, like a foreign object lodged into the middle of a conversation. "We have options," Mark murmured, when she crawled into the bed beside him. His hand brushed her wrist with the familiar ease of years shared. His voice was thick with medication and the fragile exhaustion of someone who had crossed the line between permanence and pretense. We could look at other centers, a specialty clinic, a different surgical team, somewhere with a culture that isn't afraid to sound the alarm.
The bruises on his arms, the flutter of his eyelids when sleep tugged at him, the array of monitors, the hospital crest printed on a notepad that once symbolized comfort. Now the crest felt hollow. "You want to leave?" she asked. He gave a small smile, one shaped like his old self for a moment, before bending into something delicate. "I want us somewhere we can breathe," he said. It should have been a simple decision. Hospitals were meant to heal, but they were also institutions, weighed down with histories, hierarchies, and inherited blind spots that could obscure mistakes. The board's internal review promised a report, but investigations took time, and time was a brittle currency Kelly refused to spend in a place where an alarm had once been silenced. That evening, as the light through the blinds shifted from harsh white to bruised lavender, Kelly made a call. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like stewardship, like preventing something worse. She called a friend who ran a private surgical center uptown, someone connected to the best anesthesiologists and a scrub nurse notorious for zero tolerance toward complacency in the OR. She called a doctor she'd once interviewed in a segment on healthcare advocacy, a woman celebrated for her ruthless standards and refusal to accept negligence. She called a consultant, a care manager, a health law expert. She booked tours. She took notes. Word traveled. Where Kelly Ripa went, Mark Consuelos went. The outlets repeated their names as if they were twins. Someone was always watching. The hospital issued a second, more contrite statement. Patient safety is our priority. But behind staff room doors, tension simmered. Was the family being unfair, reactionary, driven by fear, too quick to judge? The decision, when it came, was quiet. They arranged a transfer for a gray Tuesday soaked in rain. Mark was still fragile but cleared to move. The new team had reviewed every page of the old notes, coordinating across hospital systems in a delicate logistical dance requiring signatures and diplomacy. Kelly watched as an assembly of caregivers and administrators moved with careful precision around the bed. Relief and unease braided inside her. Change meant distrust, but trust could be rebuilt. The new hospital smelled different, newer. It had a philosophy that felt studious, a quiet insistence on process. Hallways murmured instead of echoed. Nurses huddled in briefings near elevators. Hand-washing seemed like ritual rather than routine. The first thing Kelly noticed, the monitors were never muted, unless someone was actively checking the reason behind the alarm. The second, the staff ethic felt like muscle, regularly exercised, openly discussed, and reinforced through small but intentional gestures. "Good," Kelly said when the new doctor, Dr. Mendez, laid out the transfer plan with steady clarity. "I want transparency." "You'll have it," Dr. Mendez replied. He had the calm of someone trained to read panic like a second language. "We'll keep you informed at every step. If anything changes, you'll know immediately." They moved Mark to a private room with generous sunlight pouring through a large window overlooking a small park sprinkled with maple trees. Kelly liked the view. It felt like a quiet promise. Vitals were checked with near metronome precision. The new surgeon, a woman with a doctorate and a conviction that felt carved from something ancient, came to review the first procedure, the error, and their next steps. She had questions for the old team and the humility to acknowledge medicine's limits. Over the next week, Kelly and Mark created a new vocabulary around care. Checklists were taped to the door listing medication times, allergies, emergency numbers. Nurses were doubled for oversight. A patient safety officer visited at every shift change to review protocols. For the first time since the incident, Kelly slept. But the outside world didn't. Reporters called, politely at first, then hungrily. Why had a national morning show host moved her husband during an active review? As if the question was about loyalty to an institution, not the preservation of a life. Social media was less forgiving, quick to divide into absolutes.